Picture this. It is 7:15 p.m. on a Friday in October 1994. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and you are crammed into the back seat of a Ford Taurus, the heater humming against the autumn chill. The week is finally over. The homework is done, the parents are off the clock, and the car turns into a strip mall parking lot illuminated by the buzzing blue and yellow glow of a torn ticket stub logo. You aren't just going to a store, you are embarking on the weekend's main event. For the next 45 minutes, nothing in the world matters more than securing the last copy of Jurassic Park or Speed. But let's pivot from that warm, fuzzy memory to the reality of the Friday night ritual. For those who lived it, the video store wasn't just a library of films. It was a high-stress arena of scarcity, negotiation, and sensory overload. It was a place where your entertainment for the next 48 hours hinged entirely on your ability to judge a book by its cover, and where the disappointment of an empty shelf was a genuine, visceral blow. This wasn't the instant gratification of streaming. This was the era of the hunt, where you had to work for your leisure, and the prize was a chunky plastic brick. The experience began with the smell. It was a specific, chemically complex scent that no modern streaming service can replicate. The moment the automatic glass doors slid open with a mechanical whoosh, you were hit with an olfactory cocktail unique to late 20th century America. A dense mix of industrial carpet cleaner, ozone from overheating fluorescent lights, stale popcorn oil, and the faint dusty aroma of thousands of plastic cases off-gassing in a windowless room. It smelled like Friday. It smelled like possibility. The layout of the store was a psychological trap designed to maximize desire. You walked in on the cheap gray industrial carpet, often patterned with generic geometric shapes meant to hide stains, and were immediately funneled toward the wall. This was the prime real estate, the section dedicated to new releases. In the mid-90s, a new release rental could cost anywhere from $3 to $4.99. Adjusted for inflation, that's nearly $10 just to borrow a movie for 2 nights. Yet, we paid it gladly. The wall was where the night's drama played out. You would scan the rows of high-gloss box art, looking for the hit movie everyone was talking about at school or work. The system was cruel in its simplicity. Behind the display box, there should be a generic plastic case or a token indicating the tape was in stock. Walking up to the display for Terminator 2 or The Lion King, your heart would actually race. You'd reach behind the cover art, fingers groping for plastic. If your hand met empty air or the cardboard back of the shelf, the game was over. You were too late. The disappointment was crushing. You didn't just scroll to the next option. You had to physically mourn the loss of the night you thought you were going to have. This scarcity forced us into the aisles, the back catalog hinterlands where older films lived. This is where the true texture of the era revealed itself. Without Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, or a trailer to watch on your phone, you were flying blind. We judge movies entirely by their covers. The art was often misleading, painted by artists who may not have even seen the film, promising explosions or monsters that appeared for 3 seconds in the actual footage. You'd stand there, holding a box for a B-grade sci-fi flick, weighing it in your hand like a piece of fruit, reading the hyperbolic synopsis on the back. A non-stop thrill ride, quoted from a newspaper in a town you'd never heard of. You had to trust it. You were gambling your time and your allowance on a piece of cardboard. The aisles were also the site of the great American family debate. In 1992, you couldn't retreat to separate rooms with separate iPads. You had one VCR, one TV, and one choice. The negotiations were fierce. Parents wanted a drama, kids wanted cartoons, teenagers wanted the slasher movie with the forbidden R rating. You'd hear voices rising over the tops of the metal racks, husbands and wives arguing over whether they were in the mood for a comedy or a thriller, siblings fighting over who got to pick last time. It was a communal stress, a friction that forced people to communicate, compromise, and eventually settle on Twister for the second time, because it was the only thing everyone could agree on. There was a tactile weight to the shopping experience. The tapes weren't just content, they were objects. If you were at a Blockbuster, the cases were white plastic with a satisfying snap lock mechanism. If you were at a local mom and pop shop, often called something like Video Village or Movie Time, the cases might be clear, yellowing plastic, brittle and cracked at the corners. You carried your stack of 3 tapes to take advantage of the rent 2 get 1 free weekend special to the counter like treasure. The checkout line was the final gauntlet. This was where the impulse buy was invented. Surrounded by boxes of Raisinets, Goobers, and microwave popcorn that cost 3 times the grocery store price, you waited while the clerk, usually a teenager in a polo shirt vest, scanned your membership card. The computer would beep, a harsh 8-bit tone. This was the moment of truth. "You have a late fee," the clerk would say, looking at the screen with bored detachment. $2. The shame was public. You fished into your pocket for crumpled bills, paying the penalty for forgetting to return the Sandlot by noon on Tuesday. But once the transaction was done and the tapes were slid into a plastic bag, a feeling of victory washed over you. You secured the goods. You walked back out to the car, the cold air hitting your face, clutching the bag. You didn't just have a movie. You had a plan. The night was structured. The drive home was filled with a different kind of anticipation now. The promise of the tracking lines adjusting, the FBI warning screen, and the specific mechanical clunk of the VCR swallowing the night's entertainment. Once you crossed the threshold of your front door, the dynamic shifted. You were no longer longer a hunter, you were an operator of heavy machinery. Today, we tap a glass screen and a movie appears from the ether, pristine and instant. But in 1988, watching a movie was a mechanical process involving friction, magnetism, and a tangle of coaxial cables. For many families in the early to mid-80s, the video cassette recorder, the VCR, wasn't a permanent fixture in the home. It was a luxury item, costing upwards of $600 to $800, equivalent to over $2,000 today. So the Friday night ritual often included renting the player itself. You didn't just walk out with a movie, you walked out with a rugged, hard plastic suitcase, the kind that looked like it should contain nuclear launch codes. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, sat the VCR. It was a heavy industrial slab of black plastic and faux wood grain. Setting it up was an event. You had to drag the television away from the wall, exposing the dust bunnies and lost Lego bricks of the last decade, and screw in the RF adapter. Then came the universal question that defined a generation of confusion. Is it on channel 3 or channel 4? Once the machine was humming, a low electric vibration you could feel if you touched the top of the casing, you retrieved the tape. A VHS cassette was a substantial object. It had moving parts. It rattled. There was a write protect tab that had likely been snapped off years ago. You slid it into the maw of the VCR, and the machine responded with a series of distinct mechanical sounds. The initial clunk of acceptance, the whir of the loading arms pulling the tape around the spinning drum, and finally, the silence of engagement. The screen would flicker. Static would dance across the glass curve of the cathode ray tube, followed by the deep blue screen of the manufacturer's logo. And then, the imperfections began. VHS was a flawed medium. It degraded with every view. If you were unlucky enough to rent a popular comedy like Ghostbusters or Ferris Bueller's Day Off a year after its release, the tape had been played hundreds of times. The picture would jump. Lines of static, tracking errors, would roll down the screen like a bad transmission from deep space. This forced you to engage with the tracking buttons on the remote or the little dial on the box itself. You sat there, squinting, tapping the button up and down, trying to find the sweet spot where the image stabilized and the warbling audio smoothed out. It was a hands-on relationship with the media. You were physically tuning the movie into existence, and you couldn't skip. Not really. There was no skip intro button. You sat through the FBI warning, a terrifying screen of red and white text threatening 5 years in federal prison for piracy, which felt like a personal accusation. Then came the trailers, the coming attractions. In a world without YouTube, this was your only window into the future of cinema. You sat on the shag carpet, mesmerized by the grainy footage of movies that wouldn't be out for 6 months. The viewing experience itself demanded commitment. Because you had paid money for this specific rental, and because you had driven to the store to get it, you watched it. Even if it was bad, you sat through the slow parts of a 3-hour historical drama, because the sunk cost was real. There were no second screens to distract you, no scrolling through Instagram while the movie played in the background. The room was dark, the popcorn was Jiffy Pop made on the stove in an expanding aluminum balloon, and for 2 hours, you were nowhere else. When the credits rolled, the ritual entered its final, crucial phase. The sticker on the cassette was neon and judgmental. Be kind, rewind. It was a social contract. Returning a tape unrewound was a breach of etiquette, punishable by a nominal fee of 50 cents or $1, but mostly punishable by the silent judgment of the video store clerk. You pressed rewind, and the VCR would rev up, a high-pitched whine rising in pitch as the tape spun faster and faster back to the beginning. If you were a serious movie household, you might have owned a separate, car-shaped tape rewinder, a dedicated device that spun the tape at dangerous speeds, sounding like a small jet engine taking off on the coffee table. The weekend would eventually bleed away, leading to the Sunday evening or Monday morning panic, the return. The tapes had to be back by a specific time, usually noon or 5 p.m. The drive to the drop box was the final act of the drama. The drop box was usually a brushed metal slot built into the wall of the store, resembling a depository at a bank. Walking up to it, you'd often find it overflowing, a chaotic pile of plastic cases jamming the chute because everyone else had waited until the last possible minute too. You would shove your tapes into the slot, listening for the satisfying, heavy clatter as they dropped into the bin on the other side. That sound marked the end of the transaction. You were clear. No late fees. The responsibility was lifted. Until next Friday. The video store didn't just die. It evaporated, replaced by the infinite, invisible library of the cloud. We gained everything we thought we wanted. Instant access to every film ever made, perfect 4K clarity, and the convenience of never leaving the couch. But in trading the physical for the digital, we lost the ritual. We lost the shared anticipation of the Friday night drive, the friction that made the movie feel earned, and the serendipity of finding a favorite film just because the one we wanted was out of stock. We have more content than ever before, but we have lost the event.